Charting a new course in diplomatic ties, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold an informal summit in China's Wuhan from April 27th to 28th. This meeting is being seen as an unprecedented engagement, as it's almost unheard of for foreign leaders to visit China twice in close succession. We're saying this because the Indian Prime Minister is also visiting the country in June for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit.
First of all, the Minister and I would like to share with you a piece of very important news. That is, as agreed between our two sides, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have an informal summit from the 27th to the 28th of April in Wuhan, Hubei province. The two leaders will have communications of a strategic nature concerning the once-in-a-century shifts going on in the world. They will also exchange views on overarching, long-term and strategic matters concerning the future of China-India relations.
The two leaders will touch upon a range of issues, including but not limited to mutual ties, strategic cooperation and the future of India-China relations.
We are also happy that the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through the Natula route will be resumed this year. I'm confident that with Chinese side's full cooperation, this year's Yatra will be a fulfilling experience for the visiting Indian pilgrims.
In the wake of these developments, China will also start, or rather resume the sharing of river water data with India for the Brahmaputra and Sutlej rivers. Also, as was pointed out right now in that statement from the Indian External Affairs Minister, China will also allow Indian pilgrims to travel to Kailash Mansarovar through Nathula in Sikkim. Remember, this is an important point considering the route was closed last year in light of the Doklam standoff.
The meeting in Wuhan flows from the understanding reached between the two leaders last year that India-China relations are a factor for stability in a period of global changes and have a common responsibility for peace, security and prosperity in the world.
Additionally, both India and China have agreed to work together in the areas of combating terror, climate change, development and health. Speaking of terrorism as a major global issue, Minister Swaraj said that India and China will cooperate on enhancing security in the region.
The Chinese side has confirmed on the resumption of data sharing on Brahmaputra and Sutlej rivers in 2018. As this issue has direct relevance for people living in those areas, I appreciate that.
So we finally have a confirmation on this hotly anticipated meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi. But what exactly does this mean when we're talking about 6 months on from Doklam and 4 months into 2018? Joining us on the broadcast to help us decode that diplomacy is Professor Swaran Singh of the JNU School of International Studies. He joins us from Delhi. With us from Beijing is the Hindu's China correspondent Atul Aneja. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you both for making time to speak with us. We'll go to Beijing first. Atul, to you, what do you think was the big takeaway from today's announcement by those two foreign ministers?
I think the big takeaway is that this is a reset of ties between China and India. But more important for me was that this reset of ties is not taking place within a bilateral format, but in a much larger global format. And which means that in the light of major changes in the world, specifically I would like to mention the protectionist tendencies which are coming from the United States. Now, China has suffered on the trade side, or is likely to suffer on the trade and in terms of technology from that. Other countries have also been doing so. Another example is Japan. So what's happening is that Asian countries are realizing that a new world is opening, and which would mean that Asia has to be inward-looking in a way that we have to develop our own supply chains, we have to develop our own markets, and therefore we have to see at possible points of engagement. I think the larger context in which this was placed today at the press conference showed that this seems to be the line of thinking not only of China and of India. So frankly, this is Asian, if not a global event, which is likely to take place. And if you look at it as a precedent, I would say that this is something like what happened in 1988 when Rajiv Gandhi visited China. Remember, at that time also we had a border incident in the Sumdurong-Chu Valley. And it was after the military standoff that we had a fresh start with Rajiv Gandhi's visit. In this case also, we have Doklam as the backdrop. And we are also likely to have a fresh start at the Wuhan summit. So
Absolutely.
I think hugely important development has taken place here and should not be underestimated.
I think that is the sentiment we've sort of gathered from everyone we've spoken to ever since the news broke this afternoon. Professor Singh, speaking about trade, that of course has to be considered as an important factor in this growing and newfound warmth between two countries that were at the brink of war just about 6 months ago.
I think I agree with Atul that immediate trigger could be seen as complications in China's economic relations, specifically trade issues with the United States, and the response that President Trump has provided in recent weeks. There are several other triggers that one can pinpoint. For instance, during Xi Jinping's era, this expression of new era has become very, very popular. So, they are setting not just bilateral relations, but China's overall policy in this new era, which is supposed to be the Xi Jinping era now. More than that, you will notice that, China has also over a period realized that it needs to look at alternatives. If United States is going to have a difficult trade relationship, obviously it will have to lean towards India much more to build that economic relationship with this large economy next door. And you also notice in last 5 years, Xi Jinping has been talking of, redefining great power relations. India was not quite, the favored one in that list of countries, but now it seems India is also entering that list. So there are several triggers that could be seen as when a Chinese leader becomes to be compared with Mao Zedong, he becomes the helmsman. He does not then discuss the nitty-gritties of everyday policy. He begins to discuss the strategic visions. And that is how Chairman Mao used to behave. So it seems there is not going to be any fixed agenda. There's not going to be any fixed ideas. There's going to be free-floating statements, discussions on how the two leaders want to reset the relationship, looking at the larger strategic, which is long-term, and global, which is expansive frame of these two countries relating to each other. From Indian side, I also understand that, Indian Prime Minister is going to elections next year. And resolving issues with China, which will have also positive impact on India's continued complicated relations with Pakistan.
Sure.
Would be our triggers to make sure that we are able to sort of clinch something that we can showcase as major success of India's foreign policy as Prime Minister goes into elections next year. So both sides have their reasons, but I think the fundamental emphasis on both sides is to place it in the strategic context, in the global context, to talk about global vision, at least they are saying in 15 years format. So there will be other issues on the table, but I think they may not be issues like border or NSG or others, which are at other levels to be discussed. The summit level meeting will probably end up by, idly speaking, with a strategic vision being issued.
Absolutely. And I think, as you pointed out, I mean, there are a number of sticking points. There are a lot of long-standing issues, Atul. There is the NSG membership. There is the whole case of Masood Azhar. There is countless other things such as CPEC and it going through Gilgit-Baltistan. But this first step and what's going to be a really long journey when it comes to full cooperation between India and China. But the steps have been taken. Can you help us understand, place it in the global context for us? Because we keep talking about India and China as the emerging superpowers of this world. But how exactly do we situate this development? And how would the United States, for instance, be viewing this growing warmth between these two countries?
Very important points you mentioned. Now, I think very importantly, most importantly, is the strategic vision of both these countries. And I'll just take off from the points which Swaran had raised, very valid ones. You see, the sense which I get here is that Xi Jinping wants to be really the leader of globalization. Not that it is out of vanity, but because China generally believes that it benefits from globalization. With the US getting, with the America First approach, it's no longer, or the signs are that it's not going to play that leadership role. So I think China looks at Asia as a new engine for globalization. And if Asia is going forward and take this Trojan horse of globalization ahead, then Xi Jinping needs allies. And I see two major allies which he is already looking at. One, of course, is India, and which is reflected in the summit which is going to take place in Wuhan. And the second, quite interestingly, is Japan. And, Wang Yi has just concluded his a surprise visit to Tokyo, where the conversation took place between the Indo-Pacific strategy of Japan being one of the proposers of that, if not the lead one, and the Belt and Road Initiative. And that conversation is going to go ahead when Li Keqiang is going to visit in May, followed by Shinzo Abe's visit to China. So, like I mentioned, China needs allies, and it is looking at those two powerful countries which can provide that momentum to the Asia leading the globalization drive. And I think in that framework, he finds India as a necessary ally. Now, once you have established this broad framework, then you look at issues which you mentioned, NSG, your terrorism, the Masood Azhar, etc. I mean, the optics or the way you look at them becomes very, very different. I mean, I would suspect that an attitude for accommodating India's interests for the larger objectives could now be anticipated. But I would agree with Swaran that nitty-gritties are going to come down the line. But I think a framework is being established where these specific issues can be addressed in a manner which would be satisfactory both to China and India, because the stakes are higher. Stakes are higher because the relationship is moving beyond the bilateral to the regional, if not global.
Right.
And that is where this summit is going to be important, because what exactly comes out of it, what kind of vision comes out of it, and that is going to be defining in the other, issues which have to be addressed, like Masood Azhar and NSG. So I think we should look at the larger framework which is going to emerge out of this very, very important meeting.
Absolutely. And many cues, I suppose, are going to be, coming out of that meeting as and when it happens at the end of this week. Professor Singh, also, if I can ask you, it's quite obvious from the concerted effort that has been made in the last 4 or 5 months. We've seen multiple visits by key figures from India to China. I'm talking about Ajit Doval, even the External Affairs Minister there right now, the Defence Minister arriving on Tuesday, and of course Vijay Gokhale has already made one important visit from China to Wang Yi, has made his way across to India in December of last year, and now the Prime Minister is going. I hate to sound crude about this, but does it matter as to who meets whom where, like who ends up visiting which country? It's going to be the Prime Minister's 4th visit to China in as many years.
Yes, you're right. I think visibility sometimes is confused with credibility in international relations. And I think that is a thin line that one has to be very, very careful. For instance, the other much hyped summit taking place on the same day is a summit meeting between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un, which is directly linked to Kim's summit later with President Trump. So in that sense, optics of visibility would have also to be factored in as to whether the other summit does not really take away all the limelight and the focus stays on the other summit and not this one. So I'm sure that some of those issues of visibility will be there. But given the fact that these two states are underlining the fact that they're looking at long-term relationship for themselves, and they have underlined the fact that they have really regional and global responsibility they want to address, I suppose they will have to also work on pragmatic way of taking things forward, which can be seen as outcomes of that summit. So visibility to some extent will affect it, but I think the new genre of kind of leadership that we are noticing from China particularly will showcase this kind of visionary statements on how to move forward in terms of global governance and other structures of global decision making. And that's where China seems to be really showcasing, taking the lead in restructuring global order. And India has to really be careful as to how do we balance our relationship, given the fact that we follow multi-alignment as a policy. We want to align with as many countries in as many sectors as possible.
Right.
So some of the pragmatic issues, some of the brass tacks on the ground will be also important in terms of indicating where these two countries are going. So visibility, yes, to some extent, but I think they are going to focus on what comes out in terms of hard decisions taken during the summit meeting.
Okay, so cautious optimism. We come back to that. Atul and Neja, before I let go of both of you, Professor Singh brought up that very important other summit that's taking place simultaneously between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un. And Prime Minister Modi is, not a newbie when it comes to the importance of optics. He announced demonetization when everyone was gearing up for the US presidential election. So we have to talk about optics. And I suppose it's important to understand how important the visibility factor of this meeting is in the global context.
Yes, visibility is important both for the domestic side as well as internationally and regionally. And I think you are absolutely right that Prime Minister Modi has taken a highly visible step here, with all the accompanying optics which are associated with it. But having said so, I think it's very important to revisit the outcome of the Xiamen summit, which took place immediately after the Doklam crisis was diffused. And it was here that Prime Minister Modi expressed very clearly to his the people in his delegation, to whom I managed to speak when I was there in Doklam, that we really don't have a strategic dialogue with China till now, because there are overlapping areas of interest, whether it is in the Indian Ocean, whether it's in South Asia, or whether it's in Indo-Pacific. And the absence of this dialogue was something which was addressed at that particular point of time. And the visits which you mentioned thereafter, Wang Yi and then Yang Jiechi, followed by Vijay Gokhale, and now the ones of Sushma Swaraj and Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. I mean, the whole idea is to establish that dialogue framework. But the Apex meeting is going to really bring that particular sentiment which was expressed in the and optics, which is going right now at this time ahead of the Wuhan summit. I think one more important factor we should be viewing is the RCEP, the Regional Cooperation Trade Bloc, which includes the ASEAN and Japan and India as partners. I think we need to create new markets, and both China and India realize that. And perhaps there should be a greater impulse to have a regional free trade area of Asia. That's possibly likely to follow that. I was also told today that the summit in Wuhan and Qingdao, which followed, the reason why this has happened is that there was a realization that there was not enough time to talk on this vast canvas of issues between India and China, between the two principals in Qingdao, because many other countries were involved. Right. And therefore a decision was taken to have this. And following Qingdao, we are likely to expect a visit of a Chinese, either Li Keqiang or President Xi himself, to India, so that the momentum keeps going. And we are completely out of the Doklam kind of shadow in the relationship.
Absolutely. So a mix of substance and optics, a winning combination, if you will. We'll have to wait and watch to see what comes out of that meeting in Wuhan. But Professor Swaran Singh and Atul Aneja, thanks for setting it up all the same. We're 5 days away from it, and we'll of course be tracking that visit when it takes place on Friday. But for now, thank you, gentlemen, for taking out the time to speak with us here